So picture this. World War II is finally over. The whole world is celebrating. It feels like everyone can finally take a deep breath. But, underneath all that celebration, a new kind of tension was starting to build, something cold and quiet. That alliance that defeated fascism, turns out it was really just a marriage of convenience. And once the common enemy was gone, well, so was the alliance. So let's get into it. How did these triumphant allies become the world's most dangerous enemies? In 1946, Winston Churchill comes along, and he just nails it. He gives a name to this feeling that was creeping across the globe. He called it an Iron Curtain. And wow, what a perfect metaphor, right? It perfectly captured this idea of Europe being sliced in two, sealed off behind this new kind of invisible political wall. This wasn't a war with soldiers and tanks clashing anymore. This was a war of ideas. And at the absolute heart of it all were two completely different ways of seeing the world. On one side, you have the USA, championing capitalism, individual freedom, and free elections. And on the other side, you've got the Soviet Union, pushing for communism, total state control, and a one-party system. You gotta understand, each side saw the other as a genuine threat to their very existence. They both believed their entire way of life was on the line. Okay, so you've got these clashing ideas. But how does that turn into a real physical divide across a continent? Well, it really kicks off with what the Soviet Union did in the moments right after the war. The Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, was, let's just say, deeply paranoid. And honestly, for good reason. The USSR had just lost a staggering 27 million people in the war, so his absolute first priority was making sure that never, ever happened again. Stalin's number one goal was security, and his plan for that was to create what he called a buffer zone. He was dead set on surrounding the Soviet Union with a ring of friendly, pro-Soviet countries that would act as a shield, protecting the motherland from any future invasion from the West. This wasn't a discussion, This was all about control. So how'd he pull this off? Pretty simple, actually. The Red Army, the same army that had just liberated all these countries from the Nazis, they just didn't leave. And one by one, all across Eastern Europe, we're talking Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, you name it, communist puppet governments started popping up. So forget about free and fair elections. This was the Soviet military basically making sure their guys won, completely crushing any real chance for democracy. Meanwhile, the West, especially the United States, is watching all of this go down, and they are getting seriously worried. They realized they needed a whole new game plan for this new world, and what they came up with would define their foreign policy for the next 4 decades. Their entire response really boiled down to this one really powerful word: containment. The idea, pushed hard by President Truman, was pretty straightforward. It was like saying, okay, Soviet Union, we're not going to start a war to take back the countries you already have, but you are not expanding 1 inch further. That single idea became the bedrock of American strategy for the entire Cold War. But this wasn't just about drawing lines on a map. America knew that a Europe completely wrecked by war was basically prime real estate for communist ideas to spread. So they unleashed their biggest weapon, money, and a lot of it. We're talking $13 billion. To put that in perspective, that's like over $130 billion in today's money. Just a staggering amount. And the thinking here was actually kinda genius. The Marshall Plan's logic was simple. If we help rebuild these shattered countries, give people jobs, get their economies humming again, and give them hope, well, they're going to be a lot less interested in the promises of communism. It was really an economic battle for the hearts and minds of Europe. And if you want to see where this fight got really intense, you gotta look at Berlin. This city became the first major flashpoint of the Cold War. It was this massive test of wills, a high-stakes poker game where both sides pushed each other to the absolute brink, all without firing a single shot at each other. So here's the crazy thing about Berlin's geography. After the war, Germany was split up, but the capital, Berlin, was way deep inside the Soviet-controlled part of the country. And then, to make things even crazier, Berlin itself was divided. So you had West Berlin, this little patch of democracy and capitalism, totally surrounded by a sea of communism. Stalin absolutely hated it, and he was determined to get rid of it. So in '48, Stalin decides he's had enough. He makes his move. He blockades the city, cuts off all the roads, all the railways, everything. 2 million people in West Berlin are suddenly cut off from food, from fuel, from everything. He figured the West would just give up and leave, but he was wrong. What the Allies did next was just incredible. The Berlin airlift. For nearly 15 months, day and night, American and British planes flew supplies into the city. I mean, at its peak, a plane was landing literally every 30 seconds. It was an unbelievable achievement and a huge PR win for the West. In the end, Stalin had no choice. He had to lift the blockade. It was a huge win for the West. But this whole crisis, it proved something to everyone. This division wasn't temporary. This was the new normal. And it pushed both sides to make their opposition official, to create powerful, formal alliances. And the year 1949, man, that's when everything got locked into place. First, you get NATO in April, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. This was a massive deal. Basically, the US and its Western allies created a military pact saying, if you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us. And then, just a few months after that, the other shoe drops. Bam, the Soviets test their first atomic bomb. Just like that, America's nuclear monopoly, gone.
So overnight, the entire chessboard changes. The world is now split into two massive armed camps. And since both sides now have weapons that can literally wipe out cities, this terrifying idea called mutual assured destruction, or MAD for short, takes over. The thinking was pretty grim but simple. If either of us launches a nuke, the other one launches theirs back, and we both get totally annihilated. So a direct war between the US and the USSR, it's basically off the table. It would be suicide. From now on, the fighting would have to be done indirectly, using other, smaller countries as proxies.
And that right there sets the stage for everything that comes next. Decades of spying, of proxy wars, of close calls that brought the world right to the brink of nuclear war. The old alliance that won World War II, it was a distant memory, replaced by this chilling global standoff. And for the next 40 years, one terrifyingly simple question would hang over everyone's head. What's going to stop them from pushing the button?